It's a transgression that transcends party politics. So it's finally here, or at least part of it is. Sue Gray's report into parties in Downing Street and beyond has been published by Number 10, and it makes for uncomfortable reading for Boris Johnson. There had been speculation that the Metropolitan Police's request to make minimal reference to incidents they're now investigating would mean that the Gray report would be something of a damp squib. But Sue Gray has certainly bared her teeth and made it clear that worse is to come. For starters, we've learned that the police are investigating 12 out of the 16 get-togethers looked at by Gray, far more than was previously thought. They include the Prime Minister's birthday party and the infamous Bring Your Own Booze garden party, both of which the PM attended, and also a party in the Prime Minister's Downing Street flat on the day his former advisor Dominic Cummings left his job, reportedly an ABBA-themed winner-takes-it-all party organised by the PM's wife Carrie. But it's Sue Gray's damning criticism of individual events and the culture in Downing Street that will cause the greatest problems for Mr Johnson.
What the Gray report does show is that Number 10 Downing Street was not observing the regulations they had imposed on members of the public. So either my right honourable friend had not read the rules, or didn't understand what they meant and others around him, or they didn't think the rules applied to Number 10. Which was it?
Gray says there were failures of leadership and judgment by different parts of Number 10 and the Cabinet Office at different times. Some of the events should not have happened, and others should have been nipped in the bud, she says. This is clearly a criticism of Mr Johnson himself, even though the report doesn't explicitly say so. Then the report turns to the way people behaved at the gatherings. Some of the behaviour was difficult to justify, Gray says. At least some of them represented a serious failure to observe the high standards expected of those working at the heart of government. The excessive consumption of alcohol is not appropriate in a professional workplace at any time, the report says, and whistleblowers felt unable to raise their concerns. Finally, Gray says that leadership structures in Downing Street are fragmented and complicated, which has led to the blurring of lines of accountability. Again, this is a criticism that lands at the PM's door, even though Gray doesn't say so. Those at the top do not need to wait for the police to finish their investigation to make vital changes, she says. So, Boris Johnson knows that both he and his wife are under police investigation, and Sue Gray clearly has more to say once that police investigation concludes. If the Prime Minister manages to convince backbenchers to hold off sending in letters of no confidence in him, he might buy himself weeks or even months to try to turn things around by relaunching his Downing Street operation and hoping that time proves to be a great healer in his relationship with his MPs, the Tory party members and the public at large.
That is why we are making changes now to the way Downing Street and the Cabinet Office run, so that we can get on with the job that I was elected to do, Mr Speaker, and the job that this government was elected to do.
Whatever happens next, Partygate has been the biggest crisis of a premiership that Boris Johnson had hoped would last for a decade or more. The polls in recent weeks have shown that Boris Johnson, the man who could reach the parts other politicians couldn't, has gone from one of the most popular leaders of recent times to one of the most unpopular. Where predecessors like May, Cameron and Thatcher were forced out because of misjudgements they made on policy, it's Boris Johnson's personal behaviour that has brought him to the brink.
The update has proven that Boris Johnson allowed a culture and was part of a culture that thought that the rules don't apply to them. You know, they were drinking booze, laughing, joking, having parties.
Up until now, the fight against COVID allowed the Prime Minister to drown out almost everything else in Westminster for almost 2 years. There had, of course, been challenges to his authority as right-wing MPs grew increasingly frustrated about lockdown rules, and in the background there were also rumblings about his brand of conservatism. But for the most part, Boris Johnson managed to bat most of these threats off. While the Prime Minister's maverick style of leadership always came with a high degree of risk, no one had predicted that the biggest threat to his premiership would come in the form of drinks parties held within Downing Street while the rest of the country was making daily sacrifices. Like many big political scandals, it was something of a slow burner. It was on November the 30th that the first accusation of parties that broke lockdown rules emerged. The story initially struggled to catch the public's imagination, but a few days later, ITV News obtained a video of the Prime Minister's press secretary, Allegra Stratton, joking about the Christmas party in a rehearsal for a press conference.
This fictional party was a business meeting. And it was not socially distanced.
She later resigned.
And this afternoon, I am offering my resignation to the Prime Minister.
Over the course of the following months, a slow drip of further lockdown-breaching parties and gatherings across Whitehall and Downing Street captured the news agenda and stoked the fires of public anger. But it was in the new year that the revelations took a turn for the worse. The Prime Minister had attended a drinks party in the Downing Street garden to which 100 people had been invited by his principal private secretary, Martin Reynolds, who told them to bring your own booze. Then we revealed in the Daily Telegraph that 2 separate leaving do's had been held in Downing Street in April 2021 on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral. This in particular will have struck a chord with the general public, who watched Her Majesty mourn the loss of her husband of 74 years all by herself in accordance with the rules at the time. Then came the news that the Prime Minister's wife Carrie had arranged a birthday get-together for him in the Cabinet Room in June 2020, complete with cake and a buffet. In all, there were 16 parties or get-togethers in Downing Street or Whitehall that formed part of Sue Gray's report. The Metropolitan Police is now looking into 12 of them. In some respects, the report's findings were immaterial because the damage to the Prime Minister's standing, both among his own MPs and among the public at large, has already been catastrophic.